Hey everyone, Savannah here, and in today's sketch we're drawing a fun back-to-school backpack in Procreate. The color palette and outline are available for free on my Patreon, and I'm using my free brush set. Check the links down below, and let's get started. First thing we're going to do is fill in the lockers in the background there. So we're going to create a new layer. So go to layers, click that plus, and drag it below the outline layer. And then you're going to click into the colors, specifically under color palettes, and scroll until you find the backpack color palette that I've provided for you. And we're going to use a light blue. It's going to be the top right blue here listed. We're going to use that to fill in the lockers here. And I am going to use the square brush for this. That is part of the brushes that I provide for free. What I'm going to do is make it a larger size so I can just fill the lockers up here very quickly. And then I am doing a straight line by just dragging the pencil across the screen, and without lifting it, you just hold that there for a second and it should straighten that line for you. I cannot draw straight lines that well. My intended curve, I think it's just because I'm left-handed, maybe, I don't know, but this is a really helpful trick to do if you want to draw a really long straight line. You just hold it there and it will set it to a straight line. Then go ahead and alpha lock that layer. We will add some details, but we're going to start adding in some other areas here first. I'm grabbing that light reddish orange color. I'm creating a new layer above the lockers, and then same tactic, I'm doing that straight line, just dragging it across, but this is going to be the floor that the backpack is going to be sitting on. And then we're just going to fill that in with that same color. Again, we'll add some details here in a little bit, but go ahead and add a new layer. And let's go ahead and trace and fill in the shape of the backpack. For this one, I am going to use the circle brush because it's going to be easier with the curves here instead of the square brush. So go ahead and trace this with that gray color. Again, we will add details and everything like that as we go along, but for now we're just kind of blocking in the colors or the shapes for now. And now I usually like to turn the outline layer off once I have the outline drawn in, so I can see if I need to tweak anything for that layer or if I'm filling it in properly. Sometimes when you have that outline layer on, when you're going to fill it in, you miss spots. So when you go to alpha lock it and you start adding details, you'll notice that there's a spot that is missing. So it's best to just turn that layer off when you're going to fill in the object. Again, it's just so you can see where you need to make modifications. Now go ahead and alpha lock that layer, and we will move on to adding a few details. So I'm grabbing in that lighter grayish color, and I'm gonna do the right side of the backpack is a little bit lighter. So everything to the left is going to be darker. I'm going to have this light coming down. You can kind of see in that final image in the bottom left, the overlay image there. I have this light coming in from the right side. So everything on the right should be brighter than everything on the left. So that's what I'm kind of doing. The face of this backpack is going to be this lighter gray. I'm switching over to the circle blend brush and just kind of blending it out a little bit on the side, but we'll keep building up different colors. And then towards the end, I'll show you how I add that light source and also the shadow source here. But we're just going to add in the basic coloring here. So we're doing darker gray on the left, lighter gray on the right. And again, you can turn the outline layer off just to see how things are looking, but let's keep adding in details. So anywhere that's kind of sticking out, again, the left side's going to be in the shadow. So that's why I'm adding here this shadow, because there's that pocket in the front and the bag is rounded. So I want to add shadows there. And then I'm just kind of adding an outline, rough outlines around where there's maybe different zippered pockets, because I want there to be a little bit of definition so it doesn't just kind of blend in and just be one color. So that's why I'm using that dark gray color I used on the left side to kind of give a little bit of definition on this backpack. Same with around this bear. I just had fun adding random things to this backpack. I just imagine it's like a kid's backpack. They'd have a lot of fun, bright things on it. So the bear, I'll add shadow underneath of all of these pockets and things like that. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow, and then we'll keep blending and adding in kind of depth to this backpack. So same with this loop strap, you want to have some of that shadow there because it's tucked up behind. So just keep building up on these layers here. And because I imagined this as a kid's backpack, I'm going to pull in a lot of bright colors. So I'm going to grab this dark pink color and I'm just going to add some of these markings. I'm thinking almost like maybe they put stickers on their bag, or just like kind of confetti type things, just to brighten this up, to make it more fun. So I'm going to do some with the pink. I'm going to do some with the orange. And I'm still on that circle blend brush, but I'm pressing a little bit harder. It's a pressure sensitive brush. And so if you press too lightly, it's going to be more white than it's going to be the color that you're adding in. But if you press a little bit harder, it'll pull more of that color in. So I'm just adding a few kind of markings here and there, kind of like confetti, just to make this a lot more fun and more playful for this backpack. And now we're going to work on the keychains. So I had a lot of fun with this. I just kind of made up a few keychains I thought my daughter would like. She doesn't currently go to school, so this backpack's kind of just a fun take on what I think she would use when she goes to school. But feel free to use any keychains that you like. I did the heart, a donut, because who doesn't love donuts, a kind of lightning bolt, and a star. But again, feel free to do anything. And with the backpack too, feel free to change this up. Maybe go off of a backpack you currently use or one you had as a child, or maybe one your kids use. You can use anything as a reference for this. You don't have to do the exact backpack that I'm doing here. But I just had a lot of fun with it. With these keychains, it was a lot of fun to think of what could be on this backpack. And so we're just gonna fill in the colors here. We'll work on adding some details in a second as well. And just, again, have fun with it. Keep filling up on these colors and then we'll add those details in a second. Now, one thing for the rings, the keychain rings that I used, I did a different layer for them and I moved that layer below the actual keychains. And I ended up picking a darker gray color because it was kind of blending in with the backpack color. So make sure you, whatever color you pick, it stands out a little bit from the background color. But essentially, I just picked this dark gray color here for the rings part of the keychain. And then I turned the outline layer off so I could see where I need to touch up the rings. Now, I am going to work on the bear here in a second, but I realized I kind of want to go more gray with this bear. So I'm grabbing this grayish blue color and I'm going to add more of that color to the backpack, which in hindsight, I should have done these kind of confetti markings on a separate layer because now I have to be mindful and work around it. But that's okay. I'll work around it. I'll give it a little bit more definition, but I wanted to make the backpack a little bit more blue tinted. So when I do add the bear, it stands out a little bit more than gray on gray with this backpack. So that's what I'm going through and just adding a little bit more of this blue tint to the backpack so that that bear stands out a little bit. And because I'm using the blend brush, I can also go on that shadow layer on the left side as well and add a little bit of that blue tint pretty easily because again, it's pressure sensitive, so I can just go in lightly with a little bit of the blue and it's not going to completely change that coloring. And now I'm gonna go work on the bear. So I'm gonna grab that grayish color we used for the backpack, and I'm actually gonna make it a little bit lighter, more white. So when you click into colors, click disk, and then you can move that up to be a little bit more white. And with everything else, like we've been doing, go ahead and trace the bear and fill it in with this white color, and then we'll work on adding details to make it a little bit more embellished. So we'll fill that in with the white. Again, turn that outline layer off so you can kind of tweak the edges a little bit, and then we'll move on to adding in the nose. So set that layer to alpha lock, That's going to help so that when you are adding details, any details you add aren't going to go outside of that shape. So that's why I use Alpha Lock a lot. And we're going to grab this gray color, still using that circle blend brush. We're going to add in the inner parts of the ear here. And we're going to add in some of the other, so around the nose, we'll add a little bit details there. We'll use black for the eyes and the actual nose. But we're going to add some details here with this darker gray color. And feel free to change the brush size. So you'll notice that I turned the brush size down in size when I did the inner ears because I wanted to have it be a little bit more defined better. But now I turn that brush back up because I'm blending in more of that color on the surface of this bear. And so that's why I kind of turn that size up. And then I'm also grabbing colors in between. So we have a very dark gray and a very white color that we're trying to blend with that circle blend brush. When you do blend, it will get you that in-between color. And so you want to grab that in-between color. You just hold your finger down. The color picker will select that color, and then you can use that for blending it out even further. Now what I'm working on here is the outline of the bear's nose. So I'm using that very dark gray color just to kind of roughly trace the outline. And then I'm going to use black for the nose and also the eyes and then the little mouth part here of the bear. And then you can touch this up by turning that outline layer off. So I want the eyes to be a little bit bigger, the nose a little bit more filled in. And then the outline of the nose, I wanted to add a little bit more around it because it just didn't look right. I wanted to kind of have that more full circle look. And so I just filled it in the rest of the way. But it's helpful to have the outline layer turned off so you can add these fine details here. And then because I'm thinking this is going to be like a 3D bear that's sticking out the back of the backpack, that nose is going to have a little bit of a shadow underneath from the bottom left. And then I'm just adding a little bit more shadow around the head on the left side because again, that light source is coming from the right. Now let's go ahead and add details to these keychains. So I'm going to grab this lighter blue color and I'm just going to fill in a little bit more of this light blue here on the surface where that lightning bolt's going to be. I'm going to add a very light pink magenta color here in the center of the heart. And then the donuts I'm going to add in once I finish kind of fine tuning these two things we just added. But the donuts, I'm going to add some sprinkles to it, similar to what we did on the backpack. And then I'm going to erase the center of that pink frosting a little bit so that we have that that donut hole there. I'm just going to erase a little bit of that and then I'll add a little shadow on the inside of the frosting there because it's kind of caving back into the inside of the donut here. So I want it to show that that light is hitting it from the side. So that's what I'm doing here is just adding a little that very dark magenta color to make it look like the hole is going down, the shadows kind of hitting it. And now I'm just going to go through and add some sprinkles to the surface of the donut here. I'm just doing these little marks similar to what we did on the surface of the backpack. Use any colors you want. I use yellow, blue, and this magenta or this dark pink color. And then I'm going to add the lightning bolt to the middle keychain, that blue keychain there in just a second with the circle brush and the yellow color. Okay, I like how those keychains are looking, so I'm going to work on the floor here a little bit, adding in some shadows from where this backpack is sitting. So again, that light source is coming from the right, and so I want the shadow going left because that's not where the light will touch. That backpack will be blocking that light from that section. So I'm adding the source to the left. I started with the circle brush, but now I'm switching over to the circle blend brush to just blend it out a little bit more. And then also make sure you set that layer to alpha lock because otherwise if you're adding colors. If you get closer to the edge, you will go outside of that edge, which is not necessarily what you want. And so if you set it to alpha lock, you won't worry about having to go outside the edge because it'll keep it confined to that shape. Now let's go ahead and work on the locker. So I'm going to grab that darker blue color, which is on that same row that we used for the main color here. And I'm just going to go over these lines here with this dark color. I'm not adding too many details to the lockers, just a little bit. So here's, kind of the vents or the openings here. I'm going through on the bottom line there, and I'll show you kind of what I do to add more detail to the top of it, but just on the bottom line, adding a little bit of the dark blue here, and then I'll take it down a little bit since there's a little bit of a shadow. I think the lockers kind of stick out a little bit, so I wanted a little shadow underneath. But again, I'm not doing too much detail here. I'm keeping it pretty simple. I'm going to grab that grayish blue color that we used on the backpack and using that on the top line here, just very lightly to give it that definition. Like that's kind of, that vent's kind of sticking out, or that opening's kind of sticking out a little bit. But again, I'm not going too crazy. I'm happy with how that looks there. And now I'm going to go and add where the locks are going to go. And I know these are pretty low locks, but I just want to give something at least a little more visual interest here. So I'm just going to grab this lighter color here. I'm going to use a circle brush, and I'm going to fill in the shapes of all these, and then we'll add some details, some shadows to the area as well to make it pop a little bit more. Now I did do this all on the same layer. You can do this as a new layer. So the locks here, you can do them on a new layer. I just happen to do them all on the same layer because that's just my personal preference. But we're going to grab this really dark gray color, that circle blend brush, and we're going to start adding in some shadows here. So again, where that light source is hitting, it's coming from the right. And so I'm thinking this part here where the lock goes, that's inset. And so you want the shadow to be the top right, because that's not getting hit by that light. And so that's where I'm kind of adding the shadow to this area. We'll blend it out a little bit more, add a few more shadows around the edge here on the outside as well, but we're just going to keep building up these layers just a little bit by little bit. So we're grabbing that medium gray. I'm just doing on the left side just to give a little bit more interest because it is all still, you know, inset here, but I want to add a little bit more color, and then I'm adding some more gray around this whole area just to give it a little bit more distinction so it's not all white on these locks. And I didn't add an actual lock to any of these lockers, but feel free to do that if you want an extra challenge. I just kept these as empty lockers, like they don't have their locks on, or maybe, kids are getting into the lockers at the moment, so they're unlocked. But if you want to and you're up for the challenge, you can add locks to all three of them. You can do it to one of them. But again, I didn't do that for this video just because I want to keep these somewhat simple for the lockers. And I'm still just using that circle blend brush, grabbing it between the lighter gray and this darker gray, and just blending out these colors a little bit by little until it's looking kind of how I want it to look. Again, not going super detailed, so I'm happy with how this is looking. And then I'm adding a little bit of a shadow to the left side of the entire lock area because the way I'm thinking is that this is going to be sticking out just a little bit, and then the lock part is the part that's kind of more tucked in, and so that's why I'm kind of adding in a little bit of the shadows here just to give it a little bit more definition. Okay, and I'm happy with how this is looking for the locker. So I'm gonna move on. You can keep working on the lockers if you want to add that lock, but for now I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna add a new layer above everything here. This is where I'm gonna add that light. So I'm gonna grab a yellow color. I'm gonna grab the circle brush. I'm gonna turn the outline layer on because I kind of roughly sketch where the light is going to be hitting. So this very faint line that you see on the surface of the backpack, that's where I was thinking the light would be hitting. And so I'm just going to trace that, fill in this color with this light source, and then I'll show you kind of the blend mode that I decided to pick for it. And now that we have that filled in, we're going to do the shadow layer as well. And then we'll work on the blend modes in a second. So you know kind of what I did. I actually used a couple different blend modes for the yellow, and I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. But for the shadow layer, grab a dark blue color. I don't have an outline for this because I decided to do this as I was going through the video. So we're just going to freehand this. You can follow along how I'm doing it here, but I'm kind of thinking about where these shadows would be hitting. And so I really want to pop and have more of a shadow here. If we have this very bright light source coming in, I wanted a little bit more darker contrast shadow. So I'm adding in blue to the side here of the backpack where it would be, the light wouldn't be hitting. And then I'm going to do a little bit on the left side of the bear's face and also underneath the strap. And so just freehand this section. You can do completely different. You don't have to follow exactly how I'm doing this if you don't want to. We're just going to freehand it, add these shadows in, and then we'll work on which blend modes we want to use for each of these. And now I'm just going to touch up a little bit of the shadow layer, but now we're going to work on the blend modes. For the shadow layer, normally what I do is multiply, but I actually like the color burn for this. And so you click on the N next to that layer, find the blend mode that you want, and then you can turn the opacity layer down. Now with the yellow, there were a couple that I liked for this, so I couldn't decide. I really like the pink tones of the lighten mode, but I also wanted more yellow. I didn't want it to be necessarily pink. I like the soft light. I like some of these other ones as well. I like the pin light a lot because that was very pink. But again, I didn't want just pink. So what I actually ended up doing was doing two different blend modes. So I did soft light as one of the blend modes, turn that opacity layer up, and then I did a Gaussian blur on it, and then I multiplied it. So with the multiplied, that allowed me to do a different blend mode, and I did a Gaussian blur on the shadow layer as well here, which you see that I'm doing. But with that yellow, when I duplicated that, I was able to do a different blend mode. So duplicate that layer. You can click into that blend mode. I turned the opacity down a little bit on that, and then I liked pin light. So if you remember a few seconds ago when I was doing pin light, it was very pink when it was the only one there. But because we have two, we have that original yellow layer and this pink layer, it makes it a little bit more of like this yellow pink, and I really like the look of that. And so that's kind of where I went with this. One thing I forgot to include are the backpack clips that these keychains hang onto. So I just grabbed the purple color, I just went onto the backpack layer using that circle brush and added in those sections because I forgot to do that earlier. So if you follow along this video and you also forgot to do it because you're following along, you can just go back in and do that now. And then you can do any other touch-up that you need to do for this backpack. So there's a little bit of touch-ups that I want to do on the shadow layer here, the blue layer there, and then once I've touched that up, I think we are pretty much done with this image. And there we have our final sketch of our backpack. Thank you so much for following along with me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and also drop a comment below what's your must-have item in your backpack. I look forward to seeing everyone in the next video.